Instead, we can use the input function x equals input, then open when we want to convert this 34 into a int or float, we use this. Maybe reminds you of a function, but this is convert a string into a boolean. It will always be true. Hello coders, welcome to my channel. I'm David, your guide to mastering programming. Until now, we have only inserted values manually, which isn't very practical. Instead, we can use the input function to allow users to enter values dynamically. I explained functions in my last video, which you can check in the description below and in the upper right corner now. So let's write our first dynamic input. The syntax looks like this: x equals input, then open the parentheses. Now, whatever input returns, x will catch it and x will have that value. So we can use that value however we want. For the first time, I'll just print it. I can write, for example, subscribe, and subscribe is printed. How this input works? Input is a function that gets a value from the input stream here and returns it as a string, which means if we want to remember our input, we have to assign a variable value to be equal to it, just like how I did it here. I created a variable x and assigned its value to the value of input. Also, the input doesn't have to be only string. It can be int, float, or whatever. For example, I can write here 34, as you can see. But this is not really a number. Yes, we can see it as a number, but Python doesn't see it as a number. It sees it as a string. To check if that's true, we can simply write comma and then use the function type and open the parentheses and write x inside the parentheses. Now when I run this code and write some number, for example, 34, as you can see, it says 34, but the value is still string. In those cases, when we want to convert this 34 into a int or float, we use typecasting. Typecasting is converting types from one to another depending on our needs. Why would we convert them? Well, with 34 as a string, as characters, we can't perform basic operations like addition or subtraction. So, in order to perform some operations, we have to convert this into an int. To do that, we can simply write another variable y and give it value int, and then inside the int write the variable that we want to convert. Now, this maybe reminds you of a function, but this is a class. I'll talk about classes in my later videos. For now, you just need to know that this int, and when we open the parentheses and write the variable name or some value here, this converts that into an integer. That's all you need to know. To convert that, I can print y and then type x, mean y. Now, when I write 34, as you can see, first 34, which is x, is string, but second 34, which is y, is an integer. With this, I can perform any operations. As you can see, I can, for example, power it by 2. If you don't know what this operation means, you can check my first video. The link to it is in the description below and in the upper right corner now. When I run this code, let's say 34, as you can see, 34 first is a string, then 34 y is an int, and I perform this operation and get this number. Also, I can convert it into whatever type I want. I can convert it to a float or boolean. I'll write a variable named set and convert this x into a float. Now I can print set and type set, so you see what type it is. Now when I run this code and write 23.5, and when I write, I see this error. Why? Because this int can't convert this dot. It doesn't know how to. So we have to comment this in order for this code to run correctly. Now 23.5, as you can see, now it works. It says float. This set type is float. let's say I want to convert it into a boolean. T equals bool and then x. If you want to convert a string into a boolean, it will always be true if it has some value. If it doesn't have any value, it's empty string, then it will have a value of false. In all other cases, it will always have a value true. As you can see here, print t and then type t. Now here I can write whatever I want. For example, 23.5. As you can see, it's true and it's boolean. I can write minus 23.5. It's still true and it's boolean. I can write 0. It's still true and it's still boolean. But let's say if I write some string, for example, like and comment, as you can see, it's still true. But if I create this empty string here, as you can see, the value is false. In other cases, in numeric conversions from numeric to bool, the value 0 is regarded as none or as empty value. So let's say I want to convert integer 0 or floating 0, whatever, to bool, then this will give me a value of false, as you can see. But if I, let's say, run here -3, here 23, as you can see, this is true, even though it's smaller than 0. So if I want to convert a numeric to a boolean, it will always give me true, except when that value is 0. That's when it will give me false. Also, I can convert numeric and integer numeric to a string, but I'll talk that in my next videos. That's a bit more complicated, so I won't discuss it further in this video. All the typecasting that I talked about until now was explicit, which means the type programmer wrote what typecasting I want. Here I wrote boolean, here I wrote float. But Python also performs implicit typecasting when he thinks it's needed. Implicit typecasting is when I don't specify it, but Python performs typecasting that he thinks is correct. So for example, if you have a variable named a and give it value 3. If a, then colon, print, then print this a. Now when I run this code, 23, it says 3. Why? Because this is true. When Python sees this, it says a, which is 3, and there is no condition. So what he does is he converts this a into a boolean, bool a, and then sees if this is true. As I mentioned before, it's a numeric type and it's non-zero, which means this is true. And when this is true, we enter this if scope. 23. As you can see, we enter this scope. But let's say if this was 0, then this code, then this if scope would be false and we wouldn't enter this if scope. 23. As you can see, we don't enter this if scope. Nothing is printed here. I mean, a is not printed here. Also, you don't have to always write one variable to store the value and then in another perform some typecasting. We can, for example, typecast right here and let's say x equals int, then input, and then parentheses. How this code is interpreted? It goes like this. Okay, I get some input, return it as a string. Now that string is converted into an int and the value to it is given to x. Now when I run this code and print, let's say, for example, 23, as you can see, now x has a value of 23 and its type is int, where before it was still a value 23, but the type was string. Also, I forgot to mention that if we want something to be printed before we type the value we want, we can here open the quotes and type what we want. Type some integer, colon. Now, as you can see, type some integer is printed, and here I can write, let's say, 23. Now, x has still a value of 23, and it's still an int. I hope you found this video helpful. Like and subscribe for more coding content. See you in my next video. Until then, keep coding.